we've got all the things we need here to do some cuttings with our figs. Figs are one of my favorite plants to propagate from cuttings because they really are so easy and they're a nice plant to share with others. First off, as we brought our cuttings in from doing our pruning outside, generally we want wood that's about this thick in diameter. Wood that grew last year, so it's going to be ready to push off buds and root very, very easily. So we've got our cuttings, label, of course. I like pencil on plastic. It doesn't, wash away with the humidity and the water that we're going to be dealing with, so a good plastic label with pencil. Rooting hormone, pour it into a dish. We don't want to dip into our clean, sterile rooting hormone, so we'll dip into here, and then when we're done, we'll just throw it out. I've got a little bit of water, and that's both for dipping into our cut ends so the rooting hormone sticks a little bit better, and we want to root our media. So the media is probably the most important thing. We want sterile, clean, and we want something that drains really, really well. You can see the difference here. This is more of your seed starting mix. You see how fine this is? This is going to do a good job of holding water. We don't necessarily want to hold water when we're doing these cuttings. Something that has a little bit more pine bark in with the peat moss, and you can see the perlite is much bigger in texture than, say, your seed starting mix. And actually, I like to kind of loosen this up, make it even more airy than what this is. And so I like to put a little bit more perlite. You could probably root these in straight perlite. Lighten this up even more. And then I like to wet this media before I try to do my cuttings. So I don't have drain holes in this. So we'll add our water. So you probably need to add some, maybe a little bit more water than what you initially think. And warm water tends to sort of absorb in there a little bit better. I've just got a deep, clear plastic container with some drain holes. I just washed it. And then I will put this on this heat mat. And that extra temperature down here in my cool basement will help to start the rooting process on these cuttings. Sanitize my tool. I'm going to let this kind of sit on there for 10 seconds or so, just so I know I'm not introducing anything onto those fresh cuttings. This cutting here, the main thing to keep in mind is just nodes, right? So where you have that thin little line with the leaf scar, right above that is going to be your leaf bud. So in general, I like to make my bottom cut at a little bit of an angle, and that's going to increase the surface area of that cambial tissue, and that's where our roots are going to originate from. Nodes here, 1, 2, 3. The inner nodes are a little bit longer on this. We're going to make a flat cut up here at the top. 3-node cutting. And that's the tip. I'll toss that out. So, something I tried last year, just to prevent that tip from drying out and maybe dying back a little bit, I used parafilm. I wrapped the top part of the cutting that's going to be above the soil line in parafilm. The buds push right through the stuff. It's not really a concern. So here's my cutting. 1 node, 2 nodes below the soil. We'll dip that in rooting hormone here in a minute. And then this is the part that's going to be out of the soil. So, I don't want that to dry out. I'm going to dip it in a little bit of water. And then I'm going to roll it just a tad in the rooting hormone. You don't need a ton, and your roots are going to originate right here along where this cambium layer is on the outside. Just a tad. And then I'm going to set it at a bit of an angle because these things don't really need a ton of space. I'm going to put all these cuttings in here and just kind of stack them on top of each other. And you may ask, why am I jamming them in there so close together? Once these start to break buds and to root, I'm going to pull these out and then put them into individual pots. But for this process right here, this stage, I can just jam them all in here and just wait for them to root. One trick that you can also try, whereas if we scar up or scratch up some of this cambial tissue on the outside, you may get better rooting all along where you sort of scratch in or cut into that cambium. So you can try that too. With roses especially, this helps. So you do that, and then you would enroll in your rooting hormone. And that bud right there should develop into a shoot. 1-2 buds out of the soil. No more than 3-4 nodes is all you need. 13 cuttings, hopefully 13 new fig trees by next year. Our fig cuttings are done. You know, our media is moist but not dripping wet. We have our drain holes in the bottom. And so really the next stage is to just put these on the heat mat, cover them up, and wait. You know, maybe check on the soil moisture every few days, but chances are if you have it covered and you have that greenhouse effect, you're not gonna have to add that much water. You're gonna notice first, buds are gonna start swelling green. You may not have roots yet though. So, you know, you may wanna wait, you know, say by week 4, week 5, wiggle the stem just a little bit. And if you can pull the stem, you know, just straight out like that, you know, you obviously don't have roots yet, or your cutting has died or rotted. But once you start to feel like, you know, you're wiggling it and the soil is moving, like there's obviously roots there, that's the time we want to pot these up. And, you know, as fast as figs grow, the bigger container that you can put them in initially, the better off you're going to be. So if you have the space, just put them in a couple gallon container from the cutting stage. You're just going to save yourself a whole lot of heartache that way. And you can see my rooted cuttings from last year. This is what they did by the end of the year, but I had them just in the shade of my magnolia tree. And you can see that the root system on this from that cutting is pretty spectacular. Again, this is just a rooted cutting from this time last year.